don't know a single word of English. 4 years. But in rural America, people in high school take 4 years of Spanish, and they cannot communicate in Spanish. Not only can they not communicate in Spanish, they can't understand people when they speak Spanish. I mean, maybe they can write it, they know verb conjugation, tengo, tienes, tiene, tenemos. They can do all that, but they cannot understand or speak. So what I'm trying to say by all this is the foreign language education system in the United States is very bad, but it's worse in small towns. And also another thing is, like I said, only Spanish they teach is Spain Spanish. But there is so few Spaniards living in the United States. We have so many Latin Americans living in the United States. Why are we teaching Spain Spanish? We don't have any Spaniards living in the United States. It's a very flawed system. And also another huge factor is that most students have no desire to learn Spanish because the teacher is terrible. The teacher is unqualified. Let me give you an example. When I was in high school, I came to Guatemala when I was 16 years old, and I learned Spanish. When I was 16, 17, and 18, I came for 3 summers in Antigua to learn Spanish. I was 17, and I was sitting in the classroom one time, and I asked my teacher, Senora, I said, and I asked her in English, and said, how do you say poster in Spanish? And she goes, poster. And I said, but that's the English word. She's like, oh, but they'll understand. You can just say poster. And then just to test her another day, I said, Senora, I said, how do you say fax in Spanish? She said, fax. But she said with a Spanish accent, fax. And I said, isn't it saxo? And she's like, oh, well, you can use that too. I mean, everyone in my class said, oh, Stephanie, you know more Spanish than the teacher does. And I was 17 years old. The teachers are unqualified to teach Spanish. I mean, they can't even, okay, we had some Mexicans in our class, and one of the Mexican guys would raise his hand, and I don't know why Mexicans had to take a Spanish class, but they had to. And he would raise his hand, and he would say something in Spanish, and the teacher would go, ¿Cómo? ¿Cómo? And he would repeat it 3 times, and the teacher would not understand what he was saying in Spanish. I mean, their Spanish is very formal, it's very proper, it's very Spaniard. But they can't understand a native speaker. They can't communicate. So all that to say, and also another reason why it's so ineffective is this is what everyone in my class said. They're like, Stephanie, why do I need to learn Spanish? I'm never going to use it. What do I have to learn Spanish for? I mean, people in these small areas, they don't see why. Why is it important to learn a different language? Because they're never going to leave the state. They're never going to leave the country. So unfortunately, that's the mentality we have. Also, along that same line, little desire for foreign affairs. Another general attitude is satisfaction with life as is, content with current state. People are perfectly happy the way they are. There's no need to change. No desire for change. No expectation to leave the area you grew up in. It is generally expected of you to go to college in the area, get a job in the area, marry, live, and have kids in the general area you grew up in. Why not? All right, next thing I'm going to talk about is career choices. So for people that live in towns of 400 people, 600 people, 1,000 people, what do they do for a living? I mean, what do these people do? The common, most likely, and most readily available career choices is number 1, farming. And she said it, this is the big thing that people do in rural America. Anything to do with agriculture, raising cows, raising pigs, goats, hens, all animals. And I don't really know a lot about agriculture, so I can't talk about that. Business is the next thing. A lot of people, they go to a little bit bigger city, like I mentioned, Champaign, which has around 125,000 people, and they start a business or they hook up with a business. Medicine is also a big one. A lot of people like to become family practice doctors, dentists. This is a big one too, clerical. A lot of people in rural America, they work at banks, they work at doctor's offices, they work at Walmart and stores, or they work in an office. And also, teaching is a big one. Both my parents are teachers. This is a very common. A lot of people in my class went on to be teachers with elementary school, junior high, or high school. This is an example of farming in my town. Does anyone know what these are? Take a wild guess. What? Well, in English they're called grain elevators. Grain elevators. And what we do is, not what I do, what they do is they harvest their corn and beans and then they put them in here. I'm going to give you guys a funny example. When I was in high school, my class had this thing called Career Day. The purpose was to give you a preview of the grown-up world and how life really works after you graduate college. So at the beginning of the event, we all came and we had to pick a career that we wanted to do. So everyone wrote down their career. It was only after we picked the career did they tell us how much money we would make with our career living in the area. So then we had a set budget. So they said, okay, you want to be a doctor, you're going to make $60,000 a year. So we had a budget, and we had to pass through stations, and every station was an area of life. Okay, so we had to go to this station, and this was, okay, pay your bills, pay your college loans, paydays, and this other station was you got married, this station, oh, you have kids. So we had to go through all these phases of life in this Career Day event. So I was 16 years old at the time. I had just gotten back from Guatemala, and I had fallen in love with Spanish. I had fallen in love with the Hispanic race. So I said, for my career day, I want to be an interpreter. And they said, oh, okay. And then they gave me my budget, which was nothing. I mean, basically they were saying, you are not going to make any money being an interpreter living in this area. So by the end of the Career Day event, I was completely bankrupt and totally in debt. So the event tried to show me that I could never survive being an interpreter in Central Illinois.